welcome to The Perspective, and we're so glad you're with us. My name is Mike Sherbino, and we're going to be unpacking a touchy subject today all across Canada. And the subject is this: should charities such as churches and certain not-for-profits, should they continually be subsidized by the government by having tax-free status? There is a bill that is before our parliament right now for consideration on the removing of the advancement of religion as a recognizable charitable purpose under the income tax law. Some people think churches shouldn't get a tax break. But today we want to talk to two different gentlemen. We're going to have two interviews. One is Pastor Ray Duerksen, who is a former pastor of Southlands Church in Steinbach, Manitoba. He's also the CEO of Church Renewal International, can speak so passionately about thousands of churches around the world, but in particular here in Canada, who are making an incredible difference. We want to hear about that and why the tax exempt status could negatively impact them. And then later on in the program, we have K.R Davidson, who is the president and CEO of the Great Commission Foundation. He is going to be with us as he talks about how he advises charitable organizations and presents them in a way so that they're meeting CRA requirements and really upholding every letter of the law in an exemplary way to further the good work that they are doing. So, lots to talk about today. And first of all, I want to welcome Ray Duerksen with us today. Ray, thank you for being with us. I think today I find you in British Columbia. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mike. Great to see you again, and we're in Vancouver.
Ray, take a moment and just tell us a little bit about your own journey as a pastor and your response to hearing about these proposed legislations. And the other one that I didn't mention is that Recommendation 429 also is to no longer provide charitable status to anti-abortion organizations, of which many churches would fall into that classification. But tell me, first of all, your journey as a pastor and how God has allowed you to impact literally thousands of people across Canada.
Well, thanks for this opportunity, Mike. Again, great to be with you. I was a pastor for 30 years, planted a church in Ontario, pastored it for 8 years. And in Manitoba, we took on a small church and led it for 22 years and became a significant church. And now out of that came a ministry called Church Renewal International, which I'm very passionate about, where we're mentoring and helping other pastors to be renewed in their churches, and then by virtue of being renewed, impact their cultures, their cities, their regions around them.
So, Ray, as you've had just such a vast experience leading churches yourself, and then being a mentor to many, many pastors, including myself, both directly and indirectly, this whole possibility of churches losing charitable status, how do you perceive that? Speak for the many churches. Sounds like a sucker punch to me.
Mike, that's a great question. And this is a very important subject we're talking about because many years ago, our church was growing rapidly and we needed more land. And at the time, I remember going to city council and we wanted to purchase some more land from them. And there was some resistance from a number of council members, not in a negative way, but they just didn't see the rationale behind getting behind churches and the value that churches are to a community. And so I asked if I could address the entire city council. And I spoke to them on the value of the church to the community. And in that presentation, I talked about what has become known as the halo effect. And the effect that the value that a church brings to a city, to a community, to its region. And the halo effect, people say, okay, many won't be familiar with that terminology, but it's it talks about what the value of social, spiritual, and communal capital is to a community. So Cardis, a think tank in Canada, following the lead of some research in the US, did some studies on the value, the economic value of churches to their city or their region or the community. And they came up with some astounding statistics and information that would help, that helps people to understand the value. So what's happening in society right now is the word that's going out, the information that is being propagated is that churches are simply getting tax-free money, and that's money that belongs to the government, and therefore we should take that away because the government can use it and that sort of thing. But what they don't realize is that this study indicated that for every dollar that a church spent, there was an economic value for $4.77. So for every dollar that the church spent in its programming, the community or the city was getting value of $4.77. So almost 5 times as much back. And so there was a man by the name of John Longhurst, and he was the editor for the Winnipeg Free Press, not the editor, but the religion writer for the Winnipeg Free Press, many, many years. And he's a member now of the Order of Canada. And he wrote this article entitled, "We All Bask in the Halo Effect." And it was published in the Winnipeg Free Press.
Amazing.
And it was an amazing article. And in there, he took from this Cardis study and he broke it down simply, on a populist level, how we can understand the value that churches are bringing back to the community in economic ways.
So let me speak to that, Ray, and by asking this question. So basically, for every dollar that a church has, it's having 4 times the impact in the community. And I understand that we're a smaller church in St. Catharines that I pastor, and we're feeding thousands upon thousands of people in the course of a year just through our food banks alone. But let's take this to another level. It seems to me that there is a narrative being pushed. And we got a couple of minutes. I'd like you to speak to this. There's a narrative being pushed that religion is not needed, and we don't need, the country doesn't need to hear anything that is God related. And in particular, when we think about the ministry of Jesus Christ to the brokenhearted. Comment on that.
Well, here's the thing, Mike. Back to this Cardis study, what they discovered was that the ways in which the value was being added, because a lot of people were thinking, well, in what way does $4.77 come back? It comes back in many ways. For example, working with refugees and immigrants, soup kitchens, helping the homeless, job training, programs to treat substance abuse, programs for children, community garden plots, hosting concerts and other events, counseling, recreational activities, operating nursery schools and daycares, volunteering neighborhoods. And at Southland, we had a whole list of additional ones to those named in the Cardis study. Things like people would donate automobiles, like there was a point in a period of just a few years, our members gave over 60 cars, just handed them over.
Wow.
And then we repaired them, got them up to safety checks, and then gave them to single moms. And I could just go on and on with the kinds of things that we did. And I'm sure your church is doing the same thing. Now, the reason I said that is this. People aren't, naturally speaking, giving people. And even the studies bear that out. Those that attend, religious institutions, attendees, not necessarily just churches, but those who attend religious institutions give in finances and in volunteer time much greater than those that don't. For example, in finances, they found out that those that attend were giving 5 times as much per year in finances than those who did not attend.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. But now here's my point. So the statistics bear that out. So here's the point. The government is saying, if we advance religion, then they shouldn't be exempt in their charities. But wait a minute, it's exactly our religion that teaches us that we should give. That we should give financially, that we should give of our time in volunteering. And so, they're cutting the limb on which where this whole thing sits. And so it's very important.
Ray, we got 1 minute left. Give me your final thoughts on this whole matter that's before us.
Well, back to the Cardis study, Winnipeg, they said, and John Longhurst reported this, $1.5 billion was the value. Vancouver's 1.6, Montreal 2.1, Toronto $6.7 billion worth of value that comes for free, 5 times what's exempt is coming back to the community in the city. So it doesn't make sense to remove this exemption and remove churches from their charitable status.
I just appreciate how you've articulated that so much. K.R. Davidson is going to be our guest in the second half. I know you're good friends with K.R., and he's going to bring a slightly different perspective to give us some greater insight into this whole matter. But Ray, thank you. Thank you for all that you've been doing, for how you continue to invest in the church in Canada, and the impact that you are making as you follow after the example of Jesus himself. We appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Mike, thank you so much. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate you as well. God bless you.
And we're going to be back in just a moment, friends, as you're watching The Perspective. Hey, welcome to The Perspective. Mike Sherbino here. We're glad you're with us.
It's all right here. Watch when you want, where you want.
Well, welcome to The Perspective. I'm Lori.
Real stories, honest questions, a fresh perspective, right where you are.
Today, take time to relish in
The Perspective. Follow, like, share. You're part of the mission.
Well, welcome back to The Perspective, and fascinating conversation we've just had with Ray Duerksen. And now bringing another side to the picture is K.R. Davidson. K.R., welcome. And amongst many other things in your past, you have served as a policeman, you've served as a pastor, you've served as a lawyer. I'm not sure which order. You never got locked up, I know that, and that's exciting. But now you are the president and CEO of an organization called the Great Commission Foundation. Tell us about that.
Well, first off, thanks for having me here. It's great to be on set with you. And it's great to be in this role as the CEO of the Great Commission Foundation. Just to give you a little context, the Great Commission Foundation is a public foundation here in Canada. I'm also CEO of a U.S. organization, which is called Friends of the Great Commission. And we actually just permit ministry activity throughout the world, specifically to advance the Great Commission. What we do is we work through a variety of different ministries to fulfill our charitable objects. So, for example, we would have a missionary in Taiwan, and we would be there to be providing the support and all of the administrative and structural support to allow them to be effective in their role for that particular project. And we're in 120 countries across the world.
So as you say that, there's a word that comes to mind. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you help people to comply with the regulations in the country. What's compliance mean?
Well, all day long, we're dealing with compliance. We're privileged in Canada to have such a rich charitable regime, but with that, we have a lot of obligations that come with that. And so we are dealing with compliance issues across the board because we have so many varied projects and so many different type of ministries that we work with every day, whether we're funding a church in an Indigenous islands off the Solomon Islands, or whether we're dealing with a ministry that's working through Kung Fu to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're dealing with different aspects, and all of them will have a different perspective of how both the CRA and the Income Tax Act are viewing the charitable activity.
And some of those organizations would have been what Ray was referencing as well in making, in particular, an impact here in Canada. Is that not correct?
Well, all day long, that's our joy. Joy is seeing the impact that rolls out societally. And I think that this is the Great Commission, is to disciple all nations. It's a transformative effect. And it's an absolute joy. I'll just give you a snippet. I just updated our board recently of one of our missionaries that took place in repatriating 9,000 human trafficking victims. And when I looked at the photo, I go, where are the women? And we wrote back to the ministry just asking for more information. And it was 9,000 young men, most of just graduated from university or college, that got caught up in trying to find a great job in cryptocurrency or something to that effect, and were brought to Myanmar under gunpoint and had to effect scams, etc. That's just one of the many stories that come out of the ministry activity that we're connected with.
What an amazing, amazing story.
Yeah.
Talk to me about these two recommendations that we've been referencing, Recommendation 429 and Recommendation 430. What is a recommendation? What does it mean that it's for the government right now?
Yeah, so a recommendation comes from the various committees that are set up by Parliament, by the legislature. And in this case, this was the Finance Committee that had a series of recommendations that were to be incorporated or considered for the upcoming budget. Of course, we know that the government ceased to operate under Prime Minister Trudeau. And normally when you see something advanced of this sort that is preliminary in nature, usually it might be captured in a draft bill and it would die with government. But recommendations that are going into budget don't die with the government. And so we're seeing that this is carrying on. And now the Department of Finance has a mandate to investigate this and to see if there's any validity to these recommendations.
So from your perspective, what is your concern?
Wow, it's a wholesale concern to be able to see something recommended, both against Recommendation 429, which is really hiving out one particular aspect of charitable activity and sort of politicizing, and that's against the anti-abortion not-for-profit organizations. And then you see Recommendation 430, and I think I'm just perplexed to see something like this.
Yeah.
I can understand that society might be shifting with regards to a faith-based narrative. In fact, I actually think it's shifting back. But to see that there's a recommendation that charities no longer are able to advance religion as a charitable object, like we're looking at undoing hundreds of years of both law and custom and just the societal value in charitable activity.
Well, I think what Pastor Ray was talking about and the incredible benefits that churches are in the community, even though a lot of people think, well, you know what, that's just Sleepy Hollow over there. Not so.
Well, it both current and historically. So take a look at it. You go William Wilberforce, who moved and operated out of his Christian faith to deal with the abolition of slavery. You have Martin Luther King Jr., who we sometimes forget was a reverend, was a pastor that advanced the civil rights movement. And this is happening every day. People are moving and operating on the conviction of their faith. And to be able to take that away from the charitable service that's going, I actually just think that it's just like you let the air out of the balloon and you wonder, if you don't have a why, then why do the what?
So what do we do about it?
Well, I think that the Christian community needs to voice up. They need to speak to the members of parliament. They need to write in and say, no, it is something that's very serious. We shouldn't even have this type of recommendation being considered, let alone standing silent when it does occur. I think we have to say, no, it's not proper. We should be able to see not only just for the advancement of the Christian faith or the advancement of religion, charitable activity should not be politicized. Since 1891, a case was brought out in the UK that actually dealt with this quite specifically. And if we start doing this, like, is it the next government that doesn't like the arts or the humanities? If we start cherry picking these things off, society as a whole suffers for it.
The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. How do you read this and what it's saying about all this? Are our rights being infringed upon?
Well, I think that there's an extremely strong argument to say that there would be if this went forward. All legislation has to accord primarily to the charter. And when we're taking a look at that, a particular segment of society is being focused on and potentially discriminated against, I think that that's challenging. Of course, we don't want to just be saying that from a Christian perspective. We want to be saying that overall, that no segment of society should be isolated and should be targeted from a majority government perspective. It actually undermines what we contribute to society as a whole.
I mean, this is only your opinion, and you don't have to answer. But I'm wondering, as you read the whole narrative, is there a hidden agenda, and how do you understand it? This as a Christian?
Well, I'm afraid that there's not a hidden agenda. It's an open agenda on this point. I think that to advance something where 40% of all charities in Canada will be affected in one foul swoop, that's just an open attack on any faith-based or religious-based organization. That's what it is. Do I think that this came from the government per se? I don't know. I believe that you'll probably see some other activist groups that might have been behind this, and this snuck through without the careful scrutiny. I can't imagine that this should be our government's perspective, and I'm hoping that both the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister take quite a different perspective than what was given through the Finance Committee.
Kind of as a final comment today, I want to come back to the Great Commission Foundation, as I have known of its ministry and had personally been a recipient of all the amazing things they offer. Why are you so excited about the Great Commission Foundation and all that it's doing?
Well, when you get a front row seat to this much activity, where you see lives being changed, you see people coming to understand who they are from an identity perspective, and you just see this not only individual transformation, but you see changes in families and you see changes in society. I go, what more do you want? It's truly discipling of the nations.
I love that. K.R., thanks for being on the program today. And I think we're going to have you come back as we watch this whole subject unfold in the coming months. Hopefully it will die. But in the meantime, thank you for speaking up. And thank you for what you're doing and for your incredible team at the Great Commission Foundation. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Mike. It's great being here.
You're watching The Perspective. I'm going to be back in just a moment.
Did you know you can stream our shows on demand? We are thrilled to announce the launch of our channel on Roku TV. You can now watch The Perspective shows anytime you like and navigate through a variety of playlists. How to find us? Simply search for The Perspective channel, find our logo screen, and save it under your channels of choice on your Roku selection menu. Don't miss out. New feature shows will be updated weekly.
So what do you do when God speaks to you? Would you even recognize his voice? We've been looking at the boy Samuel, who probably was 6 or 7 when he heard the voice through the night. Samuel, Samuel. He thought it was the priest Eli calling to him. And on the 3rd time, the priest finally says, you know what? This is the voice of God. And the next time you hear that voice, say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. One of the things we draw from this amazing story about listening for God's voice is that age is not a defining factor. God speaks to us whether we're young or old. The question is, are we listening, and are we prepared to respond to what he tells us to do? I want to go back and look at some of these verses. I'm going to read them quickly in 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 11 to 18. And it says, the Lord, this is what he said to Samuel after he said, speak, Lord, I'm listening. I'm about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears tingle, meaning this is not good news. At that time, I'll carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from the beginning to the end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin that he knew about, but did nothing about. His sons blasphemed God and failed to restrain them. And it says that Samuel lay down until the morning and then opened the doors of the house, and he was afraid to tell Eli the priest the vision. But Eli called and said, Samuel, my son. And Samuel answered, here I am. What was it that God said to you? He said, do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide anything from what he told you. So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And Eli responds, he says, he is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes. So it was a powerful message that the young boy had to give to the elderly prophet, that the prophet had allowed sin to rule and run in his home and also in the country, and that God was about to bring judgment. I think most of us would say we want to hear God's voice, but the question is this: it's not so much does God speak, but what will we do with what he tells us? And so Samuel, as a young boy, is charged with a huge responsibility. I want to think for a moment about hearing God's voice. Sometimes I believe we complicate the whole matter. And one of the best practices is to simply learn to enjoy God's presence, to learn to be still in his presence. How does God speak to us? Well, I believe it's through the quietness of our heart as we learn to listen. He always speaks to us from his word. There is guidelines that he gives to us. But as we hear in this passage, Samuel actually heard the audible voice of God. Does God still speak that way? Yes. Have I ever heard his audible voice? No, I haven't. But I've heard the witness of his spirit in my heart as he's lined up situations, as it's lined up with his word. There have been times, even in a dream, when God has spoken to me and possibly to you. But we know that God speaks, and that's the wonderful thing today. I want to invite us to be people who listen, and especially to be meditating on his word. Because when your mind is filled with the word of God, then you'll know clearly if it really is God's voice speaking to you. Listen to the directive he gives in Psalm 1. It says, blessed is the man who meditates on God's word day and night. And to Joshua, he was told, keep this book of the law always on your lips, meditate on it day and night. And as we do that, our ears are going to be sharpened to hear God's voice.